And the main body of topics would be on geoengineering. I had to come. I had to be in on this. I had to hear what these top climate change scientists had to say.
And that's the other question about chemtrails and whether geoengineering is being deployed right now without our knowledge. I don't have any personal insight into that, other than to say that I worked in government at pretty high levels in the White House and at state government. I'm personally skeptical of that. But obviously you never know what you don't know.
Chemtrails. On the internet, they are cited as proof of the government creating clouds to combat global warming.
They claim the American government, with the secret approval of the national government, is covertly using jet aircraft to spray population centres with aluminium, with barium, and with strontium so as to reduce people's immunity and reduce the global population.
I'm always a little bit suspicious because the government doesn't seem that capable to do something on such a large scale.
That is not rain, that is not snow. Believe it or not, military aircraft flying through the region is dropping chaff. Small bits of aluminum, sometimes it's made of plastic or even talicized paper products, but it's used as an anti-radar issue, and obviously they're up there practicing. Now, they won't confirm that, but I was in the Marine Corps for many years, and I'll tell you right now, that's what it is.
And what happens here, military jets, some come out of Key West Air Force Base, and they move off into the atmosphere, and they drop mylar strips. Some could be a little wider, some are small glass fibers that are coated in aluminum. And what the Air Force does is they take their military jets and they dump these out of the aircraft, they fall into the atmosphere, and some take as much to a day to fall down.
This is inevitably military or something going on. The government, the Air Force, you see this kind of a pattern like this, you can rest assured there's something going on. They're actually little bitty magnetic and little bitty strips of, whether it's aluminum.
It's a nuisance to you and I to determine what's real and what's not, but it looks like it is a life-saving operation there for the military.
The apparent motive behind this conspiracy theory is one world government.
Order, I cannot hear.
Mr. Speaker, I want to assure the House that both my ministry and my colleague, the Minister of Health, who have received correspondence on this issue, that this conspiracy theory does not have an iota of truth, and that the trails observed from aircraft simply come from jet engines.
Number 9 of order.
And I think what an appalling example it is of the new Foreign Affairs spokesperson for the Labour Party that she's spreading conspiracy theories about the United States government.
I think the House has heard sufficient.
It is called geoengineering, fighting global warming by putting a chemical dust in the atmosphere and reflecting harmful radiation back into space.
We take geoengineering to mean deliberate, large-scale intervention in the Earth's system.
There are a variety of schemes that have been discussed for geoengineering. A classic example is injecting reflecting particles into Earth orbit.
Nevertheless, there might be some good reasons to think about alumina. It turns out, first of all, there's been a lot of work on the environmental consequences of alumina in the stratosphere. The big deal really is that alumina has 4 times the volumetric rate of forcing for small particles as does sulfur. And that means you have 4 times less surface area for the same rate of forcing. And this is a much bigger deal. You have roughly 16 times less the coagulation rate, and that's the thing that really drives removal. So you could get away, we think, with much smaller mass fluxes.
So that's why we see things like in the use aircraft patent from '89, they talk about aluminum. And that's why we're seeing in the surface water samples aluminum. And here's David Keith saying that aluminum has 4 times the reflective volume surface area. So they'd like us to think that we're talking about sulfur, but here they slipped up and let it out that aluminum is 4 times better to achieving their ends, and it sounds like it's going to be one they don't want us to know the effects of.
The little picture is from a nanofabrication study, which shows you can make very high quality, and do this in just a jet in a very simple way, make high quality alumina particles just by spraying aluminum vapor out, which oxidizes. So it's certainly in principle possible to do that. There's a big literature that's already looked at that. And you could do that by either building new versions of these aircraft or even re-engineering existing aircraft. So there's some ideas of that. So you go to an engineering firm and you want this done. They don't say this is hard or unusual. They say, okay, yes, we could do it. Aerosol geoengineering looks like it is so cheap that the cost is basically not going to be an issue. That means that implementation decisions will be risk-to-risk decisions. the risk of doing it against the risk of not doing it. And it makes the problem of how we govern it fundamentally harder and different and novel. So I've told you that it's cheap to deliver materials to the stratosphere, and I'm convinced that's true. I don't think that will change. But I think the more we do research, the less easy this will look, the more complicated the environmental effects will look. And that's a good thing, because right now it looks too easy. So I think that if we do more research, we're likely to find out that it's harder and more complicated than we thought, and that the side effects are harder to manage, and that's a healthy outcome that will make it easier to do the management. Of course, the opposite reaction is possible. It's an empirical question, how people will actually react to knowledge about this. Another reaction is to say, if these crazy scientists are so concerned about putting CO2 in the atmosphere, they want to think about these things, then that might actually mean we should be more serious about the risks of CO2 in the atmosphere. And by the way, it's not really a moral hazard, it's more like free riding on our grandkids. And by the way, it's not really a moral hazard, it's more like free riding on our grandkids.
Numerous air quality studies, including from CARB, California Air Quality Resource Board, have named submicron-sized particulates as being particularly harmful for human respiration. Through all the discussions today, I have not heard any mention of this fallout, and has this been studied, and also the effects of a highly reactive metal like aluminum on toxifying soils and waters?
The question is, what would be the effects of these materials on human health if they came down into the stratosphere, in particular small particles and aluminum?
So the collaborators of mine working on the aerosol scheme are actually folks from Carnegie Mellon who focused on human health impacts. And while we haven't published it, that was the very first thing we did, was do the order of magnitude calculation in level pencil and paper, but with an expert on human health impacts about whether there could be an issue. And for aluminum or other particles, there are a lot of toxicological things that need to get looked at seriously. But if you're just thinking about the sheer number of particles and the human health impact of small particles, the answer is, well, we haven't published it. That was the first thing we looked at with some of the leading experts who do epidemiological research on human health impacts, and it's not even close to being an issue.
Clarify, so 10 megatons of aluminum dumped into the atmosphere would have no human health impact.
So let me be more careful here. We're to separate out the toxicological. So the alumina, we've only begun to research and published nothing. Alumina, we've only begun to research and published nothing.
Dane looked at him and he said, so you're telling me that spraying 10 to 20 megatons of aluminum, as you said, would have no human health effects? He took a deep breath and he swallowed and he said, let me be more careful here.
We haven't done anything serious on alumina, and so there could be something terrible that we'll find tomorrow. We haven't looked at it.
And that, for me, that was the whole main point of what is going to be coming out to the public. It's the damaging effects of aluminum that are being found around the world in massive amounts. Here's David Keith confronted on this very issue, and he looked, at that point like they just let the cat out of the bag. My name's Mike Murphy. I'm a filmmaker in from Los Angeles. We're covering an issue called geoengineering. Okay, thanks guys. Senator, quick question about the issue of geoengineering.
I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about.
And wondering if you were supportive of geoengineers' proposals of spraying 10 to 20 million tons of aluminum into the atmosphere.
I should really get a briefing paper on it before I give an opinion.
Oh, not a problem. Are you aware of the issue?
Not completely.
At all? Okay. Do you have a letter from constituents, and people have concerns?
Yeah,
We're making a documentary about the sea.
I don't know. You guys have credentials to be here?
Yes, we do. We pass through security as well.
Endowed by our Creator.
I think so.
Please don't touch me. Please don't touch my property.
You're lying.
No, what did we lie? What did we lie about, sir?
No, we're not.
What are we lying about? Lying about what?
It's a little unusual, huh?
I haven't heard that.
Okay. You're not aware of it? And it appears that these programs have already been deployed.
I had to look at that proposal, and so, why don't you let me review it?
I can do that. Are you aware of?
Actually, I'm going to go.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and get that. I will take a look at this, and I will act accordingly.
General, I'm sorry. This program, this openly covert program of the aerosol spraying, stratospheric aerosol spraying, geoengineering, using tons of aluminum, spraying it up in the sky.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay.
Commonly called chemtrails, sir.
When you were the head of NEMA, did you see the aerosol trails?
Mike Murphy, filmmaker in Los Angeles.
Hi, sir.
And we're covering an issue called geoengineering, and wanted to know if you're supportive of geoengineers' proposals. Congressman?
Hey, Congressman.
I'm wondering if you're supportive of geoengineers' proposals, which is dumping 10 to 20 million tons of aluminum into the atmosphere. Pardon?
Okay.
Can you make an appointment to my office?
I'm not supportive of it. I haven't looked at it close, so I don't.
Have you heard of the issue? Because it's becoming mainstream in public, and there are actually congressional committees which are being formed to talk about these programs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think when we drop anything into the atmosphere, we should know prior to the effect of that, right?
Yes.
And if we don't have the knowledge as to what the effect will be, we shouldn't do it.
I think there are 4 different options for thinking about deployment of geoengineering. The first one would be we just ban it.
I would argue that one does not want to get too firm a restriction in place on small-scale studies early on because it'll tie the science hands. I think what the science community ought to be trying to do is say, you do small-scale stuff inside this space, and it's a scientific question what that space ought to be. There shouldn't be a lot of oversight and restriction.
Congressman? Excuse me. Hi, I'm Mike Murphy from Los Angeles, covering an issue called geoengineering. These guys are running from the geoengineering issue. I wonder why.
I'd have to talk to my staff. I don't know what your details on that are.
Have anyone made you aware of the issue, or? Sir?
Congressman, your committee talked about geoengineering last November. Are you in support of those proposals? I'd love to give you a paper.
Geoengineering? You know nothing about the geoengineering issue?
Never heard of it. They call it geoengineering, but...
yeah, I never heard of it. It's nothing I've ever heard anything about.
When we looked up in the air today outside DC, we saw this stuff going on. Quickly, have you heard of geoengineering? No. The proposals to shoot 10 million tons of metals into the air. This committee, Science and Technology, covered it for the first time. No, I've never heard of it. So we were very concerned.
How you doing? I'm fine. So what?
We spoke with Congresswoman Watson's office, and her press secretary, Ms. White, was familiar with Representative Kucinich's Space Preservation Act, which mentioned chemtrails and the weaponization of the atmosphere and space, and then it was pressured to be taken off the bill. Did you see the aerosol spraying going on today over the Capitol?
Congressman?
Geoengineering carries with it a tremendous range of uncertainties, ethical and political concerns, and the potential for catastrophic environmental side effects.
He's not one to do interviews very often, so not unless we usually really pressure him into it.
Okay.
So don't, all that is, don't hold your breath.
As chairman of the Committee of Jurisdiction, I feel a responsibility to begin a public dialogue and develop a record on geoengineering.
We want to know if you're supportive of their measures by spraying 10 to 20 million tons of aluminum into the atmosphere?
No, I think we need to have more research.
Okay. And about the issue of current deployment, there's literally a mountain of evidence that many people believe proves the deployment of these programs. Any knowledge of that?
No, there's certainly not a mountain of evidence. But I do support research into geoengineering, and I also support looking into the international governance of that.
Okay.
I hope anybody that has studied it knows, which I think, that it's a radical proposal, and I hope we don't have to use it, but there may come that point in time where we do.
Now, if we could provide you with the evidence that suggests that these programs are and have been ongoing, would you be willing to address this publicly?
we've had about 3 or 4 hearings on it. We have addressed some of it.
Well, not about the proposals, but about the current deployment of these programs. Citizens.
I don't support the current deployment. I think we need to have more research, and they have consequences that go beyond one nation, and so I think that there needs to be governance to that.
Governance is not simply an issue of deployment, but governance before deployment in terms particularly of large-scale scientific field work.
I concede that on this subject and in general, it's not popular to talk about global rules.
And when these people started talking about the need for UN Security Council oversight, a supranational environmental security enforcement with a strong mandate by the UN, you know, it really is clear that they're looking for a global power behind the manipulation of the environment.
But I do think it needs to be sort of an international kind of treaty that does tie and bind all nations into a common fate. It is a common fate.
And unfortunately, it's not just big governments that could do this. It is small governments. It is billionaires probably could figure, I'm going to save the world all by myself, and I won't bother to mention it.
How do we decide when there's a planetary emergency? Whose hand is on the thermostat? How do we decide when to start it? There's no way to do that right now. And what if we do start doing it, and then by some problem with the technology or with the will, we can no longer do it? In a year or two, the aerosols will come out of the atmosphere and temperatures will shoot up at a rate much faster than it's going up now. And it's that rate of change that's hard for us to adapt to. So once we start it, we'll be sort of locked into doing it for a long, long time. And so that, and with basically no end in sight.
Boeing would pursue this to make a profit, right? I mean, the financial motivation to do this.
Let's see. So let me not speak for Boeing.
Is that allowed? Okay.
Yeah, well, it is what it is.
No, but someday, if the U.S. is going to decide to do this stuff, they're going to look to a company who can do it, and you want to be positioned. Boeing would rather get it than Lockheed Martin.
So certainly we have an industrial base that helps the country take on technologies and large-scale challenges like national defense. And we do that both for a profit motive as well as, I think, as a national service. So.